Dr. Tammy Lenski, thank you so much for your time here today. So, for those who are watching this recording here, it's really important that you get this book, Making Mediation Your Day Job. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Tammy Lenski now. So, she's a writer, she's a speaker, a coach. She teaches about conflict, whether it's in business or personal relationships. And she's also won awards, should I say, for innovation and pioneering work that she's done. And one of these being the book Making Mediation Your Day Job. Now, I really like this book, Tammy. I have to say, it's the only one, as I was saying before, this that is on the market specifically for mediators. It's a really useful resource. It uses the principles of mediation, which I really like, and how to market yourself. It's got insights, it's got reflective questions. Plus, for some people who are overwhelmed by big books, it is 100 pages of absolute gold. So you've obviously received a
Yeah.
lot of praise from this. It's the third edition. What, people who've read this book, what have the feedback they've given you, Tammy?
Thanks for having me, William.
Yeah,
This book has had so much staying power. I wrote it in first edition was, I think, something like 2008. Because my own graduate students in mediation were
yeah,
finishing and they had a master's degree now in
yeah,
mediation, but they really didn't know how to run with it and make
yeah,
a business. And so the feedback has consistently been through the years. Thank you. I finally had a book that was talking to me,
yeah.
to me as a mediator, not a general marketing book. And there are many brilliant marketing writers out there, but someone who understands sort of where I'm coming from as a mediator. That's the thing I hear most regularly from readers.
And what I hear most regularly then is, now I'm qualified. Now what? So how do I go about getting work and building a business? That's essentially what this book is about, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. You know, many, maybe most mediators that I know and have taught over the years want to be mediators, but they don't necessarily have a desire to be a business person. The business person is the sort of
Yeah.
second to the first of mediation. As in a lot of business, people want to have a business and they look out for businesses that are opportunities and that there are gaps that they can fill in the marketplace or for underserved markets. But for mediators, a lot come at it. I just want to do this work. Now, how the heck do I find people who want me to do this
Mm.
work in a marketplace full of people also doing similar things? Because there are lots of ways that people solve their conflict problems that are different from mediation. So, I always say the first thing you have to think about is you have to figure out a way to know who you are in this work and find your voice in this work in terms of how you explain it to others. And then you have to figure out how the people you want to help, how they want to be helped. It's, in a lot of business, people have an idea and they go out and they test the idea in the market before they bring it to business, right? But in mediation, people already have the thing, and now they think their job is to sort of, as marketers, to influence and convince people to sort of pull them on in. And
Mm.
so it presents a specific problem for mediators because that doesn't particularly work well. You have to figure out what is the kind of help that people are looking for? What kind of help do they want? What kind of help are they willing to pay for? And it
Mm.
doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the mediation process per se. I find way too many mediators trying to sell process. And you know
Uh,
what? I don't really think most people care.
yeah, and I think you're right on that. It has to be specific, and you're saying your message has to be targeted on what their needs are, and you talk about that in the book. And some people might fall into the trap of, well, everybody experiences conflict, and everybody then is a potential client, and now I'm going to market to everybody there. Is that a good idea, or is there a more practical way around that?
I think it's a big mistake. And I think
Mhm.
it's why a lot of mediators get in trouble. I talk a lot in the book, as you know, about choosing a narrow target market.
Yeah.
Um, a target market is a group of people you're trying to reach something, and they have something in common, and it isn't conflict. The problem is people are saying, I'm afraid to be narrow in my target market pick because then I'm closing myself out of other work. Well, that's not true and it presents a problem. First of all, it isn't true. So if your target market is, say, graphic designers, and you get a call from an engineering office for help, and they say, we've heard about you and we'd really like your help. You don't have to say, I'm sorry, you're not in my target market. I'll send you on to somebody else. You can still say yes to anything that
Yeah.
comes in. But here's the problem with trying to throw a blanket broadly into the marketplace and hoping your idea resonates. The story I often tell is, if let's imagine I sell parts for antique cars.
Yeah.
Now, I could walk into my local grocery and I could say, anybody here need some antique car parts? Right? Or I could put posters all over, or I
Yeah.
could go to grocery websites and say, I sell antique.
Yeah.
But, maybe one person on a busy day might say,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
but most people are going to go, well, maybe I'll remember her if my uncle who, has a Model T ever needs a part. It doesn't work very well. However, in my town, there's something here in the US they call a cruise in, and it's antique car enthusiasts get together once a month and they park all downtown and
Yeah.
they love to show off their cars,
Yeah.
and people come whether they're antique car enthusiasts or not. They
Yeah.
come because the cars are really cool. If I were that person, I would go to where my market is, right? I'm
Mm.
going to get a lot more hits on people who say, oh my gosh, I did not know I had that business here.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that a target market, once you know who the people are that you want to serve, then you know where to find them. You learn the language they speak. And if you are someone who came from that target market or knows that market yourself, then you already know the language they speak. And you're going to resonate much more fully with them than trying to speak to everybody. There's that old marketing truism: when you try to market to everybody, you end up marketing to nobody.
And how do people then, adopt that entrepreneurial mindset to think like a business person, or to think like, how do I build this business? Like, is there, like, how did you go about it? Was this something that you already had a skill in, or was it something that you had to develop from scratch? And I'm sure it takes, like, for me, I know from my practice, it takes discipline to do that. And it's a focus on, I have to do so many podcasts or articles on LinkedIn, or try to feature in a national newspaper or radio show, which I've done, in the past. So, what's your own approach?
Well, and that's a really big question.
Mm,
But I think the key is first finding a market of people you like, because interacting in some way with that market is going to be important. And if you don't like them much, it's going to be really hard to get out of bed in the morning and say, I want to
yeah.
go find more of those people. So find people that you like, ideally, and you're really enthusiastic about, or at least don't dislike. And the
Yeah.
other thing is to figure out marketing approaches that you like. So
Yeah.
I love to write. So I knew early on that writing was going to be the thing for me. And it's still,
Yeah.
even though I have a podcast, I've had it for coming up on a decade now, and I still do it. And I have listeners from 60 or 70 countries, wonderful. But I still primarily focus on writing. That's my thing. If you love being in front of a camera, be in front of a camera. If you like to be in front on a podium, be in
Yeah.
front of a podium. If you cannot stand being in front of a podium, get some lessons. Here in the US, we'd say, take some speaker courses.
Yeah.
But figure out, but find your way to network with people that are in your target market. Figure out where they are, join those associations, join those groups. For folks that are watching this who don't know my story at all, I was a college dean and vice president
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be in business for myself. When you're in the role that I was in, my next job up would have been president. And I
Yeah.
became very clear I did not want to be a university
Yeah.
president. And so I sidestepped and went into conflict resolution work. I had no business background at all, But I knew a market, and that was higher ed. I had worked for enough presidents who had gone on to other universities around the country. I had been on think tanks, I had been on boards. And so my first market was higher ed. And you know what? I chose well, because at the time, no mediators were targeting higher ed.
Yeah.
But they knew me, and they didn't know me, Tammy, the mediator, but they did know me as Tammy, the problem solver, right? They
Yes.
knew my ability to be calm and be strategic and be able to work a crowd and manage a crowd and all, and figure out what interests were and manage large groups and do all of those kinds of things. And so I reached out to those folks. They were my target market, higher ed senior team people.
Yeah.
Those were the people I reached out to, and they knew people who knew people. And in the US, and I'm pretty sure this is true in Europe as well, that a lot of universities are connected to medical schools and hospitals. And so soon I would get, hospitals and medical schools, and it sort of snowballed from there. So I didn't have to say for the rest of my life, I'm only going to work with higher ed, although I know there are
Yeah.
mediators who say I'm still serving this one target market. That's great. I was able to broaden and wanted to broaden. And so that's how it builds from there. But you have find the activities you love. Is it speaking? Is it talking in front of the camera? Is it talking behind the camera? A podcast? Is it writing? Is it networking? Figure out what you love, because it's going to be really hard if marketing's already not very exciting for you. It's going to be really hard to force yourself to do a video cast or put a video on YouTube once a week or once a month if you absolutely don't like how you look or how you
Mm.
look in front of the camera. Figure it out.
And that's that self-promotion piece is so important. And speaking of about promotion then, and there's different aspect to building a dialogue with your community, isn't it? Like there's loads of different ways to do that, whether it's through TikTok or LinkedIn or there's a whole variety now.
Yes. And, the self promotion, I never have loved the idea of self promotion. I didn't like it for me. And I knew
Mm.
early on this idea of ain't I great, which is what I
Yeah.
associate with self promotion. Am I awesome
Yeah.
or am I? I hated that idea. I just
Yeah.
wanted to help people understand how I could help them. And,
Yeah.
I often say to folks, instead of saying what you do and saying how great you are, show them what you do, show them how
Yeah.
great you are. So, for example, if I'm asked to speak to, there's an organization here in the United States, many, many, many towns have branches of it, a Kiwanis, and they asked me to come and speak about mediation and conflict management for them. So I don't go in and say, here's what mediation is, here's what conflict management is, here's how I can help you. I don't do any of that. I go in and I say, okay, I'm going to teach you three things to learn how to disagree better
Yeah.
that you can do when you walk out of here. So I'm teaching them something, and by teaching them, I'm showing that I know what I'm talking about. I'm engaging with them. I am not, so I'm self-promoting indirectly,
Yeah.
And when I did that a couple of years ago, and then they asked me to back recently, I got tons of work out of that. I wasn't even trying to get more work out of that,
Yeah.
but I did,
Yeah.
and people who met me there who weren't in a position, who were consultants themselves, weren't in a position to hire, but they gave my name to
Yeah.
organizations. So that's sort of how it goes. So show how great you are rather than self promote as, I'm great.
Yeah, and I like that where you're really what you're doing is you're demonstrating your expertise and your knowledge. And something what you just said there then is that there's other consultants or people who can be sneezers, connectors, and transformers. And I love this part of the book. If you just introduce us to that, because readers of this book will love this section.
I'm so glad you liked that section, because I think a lot of people actually miss that part. You know, we can't always get directly in front of our market. Sometimes it is more effective to connect with our market through people that market really appreciates and who know that market themselves. And we all know the people who, they walk into a room and they know 20 people in that room, and they introduce you to all those people there. They are the natural connectors, the natural people who just, they know everybody, it's their thing.
Yeah.
And those people for your target market are really invaluable. And it's not about how do I manipulate them into introducing, it's about building a genuine relationship with those folks, to be able to call them and say, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? I know you serve higher education, and I am doing work that's not like yours, but serves that same market. And I would love to understand what you have learned about that market that I should be paying attention to. And I promise you, I'll keep it to half an hour. I will not impose upon your time. And be a sponge. You never promote in those learning conversations.
Mm.
Just connect with them, learn from them. A lot of times, those conversations become the place that they then connect you with other people. It might not be right away. Marketing is a long game. And
Yeah.
something you said earlier, William, I want to go back to because I never sort of closed that loop about how do you do it? How do you get yourself interested in doing something you don't particularly enjoy? You do have to make it part of your workday. In the book, I talk about 20% of your week, because
Yeah.
the challenge with a lot of our work, it depends on your market, but with a lot of our work, you've always got to be bringing in new clients. If you're not serving an organization, or you only have a few organizations in your sort of stable of clients, you've got to be bringing in more while you're serving others. If you wait till you have the time, you're going to run out of clients. And Jim Collins, who wrote a very famous book called Good to Great, it's a business book. He talks about the flywheel. You're trying to get a flywheel going that over time builds its own momentum and keeps it up
Yeah.
on its own, but you have to get it started. And so I always say, designate time every single week, like it's part of your day, to do mediation. It's a day or part of a day or part of 2 days, and commit to doing it. It's not going to happen usually for most of us without that commitment.
So here's the commitment I will make here. I'll make sure everybody who's looking at this knows how to access this book and where to purchase it from. How might they do so? What's the best way to do this, Tammy, to buy this book?
The easiest way is to go to Amazon. There
Yeah.
are independent bookstores online as well. Abe, Indie, it used to be called Indie Works. They changed their name. Indie Bound. If you go to Indie Bound,
Yeah.
it will forward you to their new. So for
Yeah.
those of you who want to support, you can. It's not consistently true in Ireland, but some folks have been able to walk into their local bricks and mortar bookstore and
Yeah.
order it because they can
Yeah.
get it from distributors. But
Yeah.
the easiest way for most people is just to go directly to Amazon.
Tammy, thank you so much for your time today. And this book is an absolute must read. Oh, other way around. Making mediation your day job. Tammy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for sharing my book with others, William. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.